Traditionally, power was always held by nation-states, and by strong nation-states in particular. But I think what we're seeing now is that that power has diffused to non-state actors. We also need to think of a whole range of different forms of soft power. So the ways in which we can build global cooperation to the point where we are able to effect real change transnationally.
Global power today is highly contested at every level, and there are many more actors involved. We have really important social movements for democracy, for the environment, for human rights, for women's rights, and we also have social movements which want to bring back a purer order, so everyone is on notice.
Power has shifted. It's much more difficult to see where it comes from, and education needs to adapt to that in terms of having discussions about what is legitimate power. It's still a big challenge to think, how do we educate people for living with others peacefully without abandoning nationalistic views, but not transforming them into hating others.
We've always fallen back on the idea of hard military power as the means of achieving our political goals, particularly in times of crisis. But the challenges now are so diverse that hard military power is simply not going to get the job done.
After weeks of warnings, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has begun.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has reminded us of the fragility of the global rules-based order, of the possibility still that there can be state-on-state violence.
I think the invasion shows that the future is a dangerous place. It shows us that the nation-state is not a spent force. The army and people of a nation-state can be motivated and mobilized by the idea of an existential threat. Freedom, democracy, is a way of being. It's something that they will not willingly give up.
There's certainly a lot of analysis which suggests that Vladimir Putin has those kinds of great ambitions that we saw in the 19th century.
Vladimir Putin is Russia's not only most powerful, but also wealthiest man. And he has generated a culture of wealth that needs to be emulated by those whom he allows to be sharers of his power.
When wealth distribution becomes concentrated to a small group, political power tends to become skewed in the favor of that small wealthy group. Our world's deepest pockets, or known as the ultra-high net worth individuals, hold an astoundingly disproportionate share of global wealth. These wealth owners hold 6.2% of total global wealth, yet represent only a tiny fraction of the world's population.
50% of the population are now having to live with 2% of the wealth. Now, that figure speaks for itself. The fact that governments are getting relatively poorer, whereas the rich are getting richer, means that there's a leakage in terms of the extra income or the extra wealth out of the country, out of government hands. And why is that a problem? That's a problem because the government money, which is needed to help with public services, hospital care, etc., are lost.
During the pandemic, rich people are becoming much richer in a way because they continue to control the power, because they continue to hold all the resources. They're able to negotiate and use all the advantages. They continue to make profit. So that's why this is making, the inequality wider and wider and provoking, all the frustrations, anger.
It's the inequality that has becoming the bigger and bigger elephant in the room. It fosters conflicts. Identity politics comes into being. Countries tend to become nationalist because those who are dispossessed, the ruling party want to keep them on side, and yet they are suffering. So how else? Look beyond your borders.
There's the ongoing rise of ultranationalism in various parts of the world, but we could also think of a number of issues that have always been there. So threats of nuclear conflict, ongoing conflicts that we're seeing in places like Afghanistan and Syria, and some new threats. Increasingly, cybersecurity is becoming a major area to think about how conflicts are waged in the 21st century. We've seen elements of cyber terrorism and cyber hacks.
So if you look at cyber terrorism, it's not easy to really know who is behind it, because identifying the source of an attack in the internet is inherently very difficult. If you look at what cybercrime, cyber terrorism, nation states could do, I don't think we have really seen a lot yet. The interesting thing about cybersecurity is that we feel that the attackers have a lot of power. So cyber terrorism, nation states can manipulate our systems, and we are a little bit helpless. But if you look at it like as a game, in a game, if the person who dictates the rules of a game probably wins at the end. And if we bring systems in place, we can dictate the rules of the game. By establishing infrastructures that are insecure, we make ourselves vulnerable, but we could change these rules by focusing more on actually getting secure systems.
So the business as usual approach is no longer an option, because if you want your businesses to survive and thrive, it has to address and become a catalyst to solve the issues the world is facing. We have poverty, inequality, unemployment, and climate change. The CEOs of the future will want their companies to be recognized as forces for good. The millennial consumers especially are driving this trend. They believe the goal of businesses should be to improve society. So profit with purpose, I feel, is set to become the new norm.
We can also see power move down towards social movements, to the people. There's a whole range of different social movements that are now, through the power of the internet, through the ability to work transnationally, are able to hold sites of power, which are able to affect real change in the world.
And when we look at kind of current situations where you might have, a violent crackdown by a dictator or a regime or a terrorist group, you already have a significantly engaged diaspora in another part of the world who can support a resistance or an opposition movement. And then you have a global public who increasingly has a sense of identification with other human beings, not just those who are in their neighborhood or in their nation, but they literally feel a sense of responsibility and connection to people in other countries.
Many will argue that states are still absolutely driven by their own self-interest, and so their ambitions are often quite limited in terms of protecting the economy and protecting the nation state. Social movements are so much more ambitious. They're thinking long into the future. Their capacity to educate is global, and they're able to produce amazing, often very young leaders.
I believe the younger generation, they view politics, leaderships, and all the global issues are very different from different generations as compared to myself. I think, for example, in the past, top-down approach, command type of style is no longer working, because they say that the older generation, they keep all the power, but they're doing nothing.
There's a real civic trust gap around the world between young people and politicians. And you can see the emergence of really amazing young leaders around the world who have had a terrific impact. From Malala Yousafzai, who began as someone who blogged about her own experiences growing up in the Swat Valley in Pakistan, to someone like Greta Thunberg, who has spoken before the United Nations and tried to hold adult communities and those formal decision-making forums to account.
Young people are really at the forefront of all of these battles, these ethical battles, and that gives me a lot of trust. Quality education is very important, and now what we have is a lot of corporations, for-profit corporations, getting involved in global policy spaces. So the solution is not to get the private sector out of the equation, but rather how do we get all of these actors that are interested and promote a more ethical view of education. And our biggest challenge as adults is how do we not become an obstacle in them constructing a better world, and how can we help them and listen to them and the kind of world they want and see how we can help them in building this better world.
The fix is not in. We can actually make our societies as we wish, but we need to do it with others and we need to do it together.
I think that we need to be careful not to fall into the trap that we are doomed, because on the other side of that, there is always going to be hope. We can see around Europe the hospitality and the warmth with which Ukrainian refugees are being welcomed. There are absolutely sections of the global order that are fragile. There are also people who are working very hard to patch it up.